Think about it. 20,000 years ago, what would it have been like for you to be a child? If you are curious, close your eyes and imagine. The calendars show the year 18,000 BC. There are no cities yet, no schools, no shopping centers, no internet connection, no summer yet, but you are the only one who exists. You are a child, and this world will be your first toy, and it won't be like the video games you play, because you've been teleported back to the Stone Age. And it's a cold morning. The sun is just starting to rise behind the mountains. In front of your family's shelter, you first listen to the sounds of nature for a while. Then you walk barefoot on the frozen ground. Your fingers are numb from the cold, but you don't care because you have adapted to it, because this is your life, and you have never known a different life than this one. Today we are going to take a journey through time with you. We're going back to 18,000 BC, the Stone Age, but this time we will look at life from a different perspective, not through the eyes of adults, but through the eyes of children. Because the question, what was it like to be a child 20,000 years ago, is not just a history question. In fact, it is a question important enough to help us understand today. As a matter of fact, the saying, "He who does not know his past cannot build his future," points exactly to this. Now let me ask you a question. What does it mean to be a child? To play? To learn? To be in need of protection? Or is it to take responsibility at a young age? I think what befits a child is to learn and play, but today, when we think of childhood, we think of school desks, parks, tablets, toys, birthdays, report card days. But 20,000 years ago, none of these things existed. Despite the absence of these things, there were children. At the very center of life, perhaps with even greater meaning than today, childhood was very different. So throughout this video, we're going to use modern archaeological findings, anthropological analysis, and a little bit of our imagination to shed light on the world of children back then and pull back the curtain on the past. And let me tell you this journey will surprise you a lot. Not only will it surprise you, but maybe it will make you look at childhood from a very different perspective. First of all, we need to know the period well. This is the Upper Paleolithic age. In other words, this is the period when people were not only using stone tools, but also bone needles, ornaments, and even musical instruments. They painted not only animal pictures on the cave walls, but also huge antlered deer. In some caves, these figures even covered the entire surface. They also hung their first jewelry on these walls. Necklaces made of bone, teeth, amulets, all in an effort to leave a mark. But most importantly, they learned how to survive. And this helped to perpetuate a generation. The world of this period was harsh in many ways. The climate was affected by the Ice Age. Much of Europe is covered by glaciers. The Middle East and Anatolia are dry and windy. Wild animals roam the land. Cave lions, giant bears, mammoths, and many other threats. It was very difficult to live. Being a child in such a world had a very different meaning than it does today. It is not a childhood of growing up with technology as we imagine it, but a childhood of living with threats and difficult conditions. Now close your eyes and give yourself some time to think. You are 7 years old. Your mother is out looking for food, while the tribal hunters are chasing a herd of bison. On your own, or with a few other children, you are making miniature spears out of stones. You and your friends find a wooden stick and attach a sharpened bone to the end of it. You're having fun and learning, but you cut your hand while picking up the bone. But you don't care, because the game has also become an educational tool for you. Education is not only about school, but also about the experiences you have in life. Today, archaeologists find stone figures, small animal figurines, miniature hunting tools in some children's graves. These are just a few of the items that archaeologists have found. Who knows what else is unknown? To find out more and not to get lost in this journey, subscribe now, like the video, and don't forget to write in the comments what you would play first if you went back in time. Were these toys? Maybe yes. Maybe they were symbolic objects given to a child to practice before they grow up. You know what this shows? Children weren't just trying to survive. They were also learning how to survive, and this learning process starts with play. It's like giving a phone to a child while feeding him her, because an uneducated individual could not survive then, and maybe they taught them this education in the form of play. So what was the family structure of this period? There was no nuclear family model like today. Mother, father, child. People usually lived in small groups of 20 people, just like dividing a tribe into parts, and the child was the responsibility of the whole community, not just the mother or the father. Aunts, uncles, grandmothers, and even other children would be involved in the care of a child. This concept of collective parenting, which still exists today in some indigenous tribes, may have been inherited from those times. This process of protection against dangers that people started back then is really interesting and logical. But within this warm structure, however beautiful it may have seemed, there were also harsh realities. At that time, 4 out of every 10 children born died before the age of 5. Cold, hunger, diseases, accidents, limited resources, epidemics, and many other reasons showed that being a child was tantamount to a miracle. Therefore, every child who survived became a symbol of hope. A child who survived was a victory. And that shows us something. Those children had to hold on to life much tighter than they do today, and that made them different. They were brave. They had to learn fast. If you're not fast in these times, it's very hard to survive. And perhaps that's why some of the most important inventions in human history came out of the games of those surviving children. The survival of the children was not in vain a triumph and a hope, because they gave hope for the future. First button, it could have been designed to be sewn on a child's dress, or it could have been designed as a mold. The first musical instrument, maybe a child couldn't stand the silence and tried to blow on a piece of bone or the sound of 2 bones. In short, children at that time carried not only the future, but the essence of being human. We actually owe them both a past and a future. Now I ask you, what does it mean to be a child today? And what have we forgotten from the children of 20,000 years ago? To connect, to be in harmony with nature, the power of imagination, or to chat together in front of the fire? Write your answer in the comments, and let's reminisce together. Imagine waking up in the morning, not to the sound of an alarm, not to the loud noise of cars, but to the birds singing or the cold wind blowing in your face. You are not in a place surrounded on all 4 sides by walls. Maybe you are in a cave. Maybe you live in a shelter made of brushwood. You have no blanket, no pajamas, not even a bed to sleep on the floor. You try to keep warm by snuggling next to your mother. Your eyes linger on the frozen ground. Who passed through here? You mutter, a fox or a tribesman. But this quiet world is your playground, because you see the world as a toy. There is no concept of a meal here. If there's food, you eat it. If not, you have to be patient. If you're lucky, you can taste a piece of dried meat from yesterday's hunt, or fish, or mushrooms, or a few berries. Nutrition in this time is not a matter of taste, but of survival. Stone Age children were used to it. Their stomachs are much stronger than today's. Today's children have terrible stomachs because of fast food and other harmful foods. What do you say about this? The clothes you wear are not made of cloth, but of the skins of the animals you hunt. For example, deer, hide, mammoth fur, bone and needle stitching are just a few of them. Thick leather soles on your feet. It could even be a status symbol for you. The necklace on your shoulder may be a memento of the first animal you hunted. Your clothes both protect you and tell you who you are, where you come from, and even who you belong to. That's why your clothes are so important. Today you're playing a game, but it's not fun, it's training. You're making little spears out of stones, and you try to throw them at the target. Who can throw it farther or who can throw it more accurately? The strongest and the smartest of the children are chosen. Maybe you cut your hand doing it, but it doesn't matter to you. This game takes on the profile of a teacher for you. Archaeologists find many miniatures, arrowheads, and other figures in children's graves. They look like toys, but in fact they were all teaching tools, a rehearsal stage for survival. In this age, play was a vital teacher for man. It made perfect sense to make children love education as a game. You have fun at the same time as you are being educated. At night, when it starts to get dark, you can hear wolves and unknown voices. Not only animals but also spirits are a source of fear for children. Some of the symbols in cave paintings may be the traces of children's fears carved into the walls. The darkness was not just an environment, but a secret door to many unknown things. No one could open that door, because darkness is like a black hole. There were no plastic toys in the past, but there was imagination. A lot of things could be done with this imagination. For example, tiny deer figures, carved bones, stone figurines, and many more. Some of these were played with, some were mourned with. The toys were not just fun, sometimes they were a reminder of a loss, sometimes they were a consolation for a child waiting for the return of his father. That is why these toys were not only toys for those children, but also comrades. Back then, when there were ceremonies, dances, symbols, and rituals, it was necessary for children not only to watch but also to participate. Their faces were painted, prayers were said, stories were told. The sense of belonging was first learned here. This world was not only your playground, but also a classroom where you grew up, and these rituals were so much fun for the children, much more fun than the video games we play now. Of course, life was not easy for them. Every day was an opportunity to learn. Even if the conditions were difficult, every game was a preparation for life. Every wound was a lesson. Living like a child was not a luxury like it is today, but the reality of being a child was much deeper. Curiosity, imagination, and attention were all shaped by living in nature. What do you think today's children would do differently if they were not so far away from nature? Today, when every child grows older and changes, we know that they've reached puberty. Do you think there was such a thing in the Stone Age? Of course not. No, there was no such thing as puberty in the Stone Age. At least there was no such thing as a youth that lasted for years of searching after the age of 12, or a definition of I should be more careful with my child like today. A child starts to learn about life when she starts to walk, contributes to her environment when she starts to speak, and by the age of 7 or 8, she becomes part of the community's area of responsibility. It was time to develop yourself. So 7 to 8 years old was the time of the beginning of acquiring enough skills to survive and the time to move on in life. And this transition did not happen quietly, often with rituals or celebrations, even traditional dances. There was no such thing as adolescence back then. For them, puberty started at the age of 7 or 8. This was the period of initiation into life. But this transition was not limited to age or physical development. It was also a spiritual test. So the child had to learn not only how to hunt or make fire, but also the stories of his tribe. Because those stories were not just tales, they were identity, memory, orientation. So a child's first fire or first hunt was not just a physical achievement, it was a cultural transition. Sitting by the fire and listening to the legends of the elders was an education for him, and this education would last a lifetime. Childhood in the Stone Age was not a long wait, but a short preparation for real life. As soon as a child learned to walk, he began to contribute to life. By the age of 7 or 8, he was on the threshold of adulthood. Sometimes this transition was celebrated with the first hunt, sometimes it was symbolized by a black line drawn on his face or painted on his body. This gave him the feeling that he was now truly one of us. Some communities would test the courage of children by sending them out into the forest alone for a night. Even if it was scary, the child who survived that night was no longer a child. In fact, he was now a member of the tribe, and this was how children were raised for life. A person's growth and development came not only with the hunt, but also with loss. Some children knew death at a very early age. Some lose their mother, some lose a sibling. As sad as this is, it is the way of life. We are born, we live, and we die. Yes, when there was a death in the community, there was a small ceremony. Sometimes small toys were placed on children's graves. Maybe that's how we may have discovered children's toys now. It was silent proof that they were grieving, facing death before they even knew the word. Death made children mature early. No matter how badly children were affected by such pain, it made their emotions and strengths swell even more. Children knew nature not only by sight, but also by spirit. They believed in spirits, ancestors, invisible beings, so they also had gods they believed in. The stories told around the fire at night were the first steps in trying to understand life and the universe. A mark on a stone, or the fall of a star, or even a dream they had, all of these things were meaningful to them, and these narratives fed both the imagination and the soul of children. Now a child grows up with phones, tablets, technology. That's why we should all take a leaf out of the old book and strengthen children's imagination in more natural ways. And finally, there comes a moment when you realize that you have left your childhood behind, your first hunt, your first responsibility, even your first story, maybe the first time you taught someone something. In the Stone Age, childhood would have ended in an instant. It could end with an event, or a painful loss, or even a night. There was no going back, because childhood in that age was not temporary, but irreversible, just as it is now. And now you realize that childhood is not just a game, but a big step for your future. 20,000 years ago, when a child played with a stone, he was not only passing the time, he was also thinking with it, shaping it. He was pushing its limits. The game was both a laboratory and a simulation for the child. However, when he made a mistake, the stone cut his hand. This is actually a mixture of play and education. When he succeeded, instead of saying, "Well done," the tribe would give him a look of approval. The game was not an escape like today, but a challenging preparation to get to know life directly. Today, children have tablets in their hands, but back then it was possible to get to know life with an arrowhead carved from bone. Now children are supposedly getting to know life through technology. But without control, the future of a life cannot be bright. When a child was drawing shapes on the dark wall of the cave with his hands, perhaps for the first time he was saying something that meant, "I was here." Maybe he was drawing a deer, maybe a hunting scene, maybe his first losses, but in that drawing there was not only observation, there was also imagination. This was the first demonstration of the common language of art and humanity. A child, instead of being content with what he sees, imagines what he doesn't see, and perhaps civilization began with the first child who imagined. Isn't it said that a child's imagination is the greatest? In that age, children were not burdens, but productive. They would pick up stones, fetch water, try to keep the fire alive, and help the elderly. Despite their small shoulders, they were burdened with big tasks. But this did not oppress them, because they knew they belonged here. Contributing to the community was the basis of self-confidence, because here everyone was part of a community. Maybe those children didn't have toys, but they respected their elders. Do you think this is a value that the modern age has forgotten? Do you think children today treat their parents in this way? What about us? 20,000 years later, equipped with technology, knowledge, and comfort, are we still children? As the descendants of that first child who played with a stone, do we still have that curiosity, that passion, that imagination? Or is everything slowly going away with comfort? Maybe the real sophistication lies in not losing the purity of that child who thought with a stone. What do you think? Now write in the comments. Do you think it was more meaningful to be a child in the Stone Age or today? Which era would you like to live in? And most importantly, do you still remember that child inside you?